Hi there, my name is Paul Sargent, and we're going to continue with AP Government's study of the mass media today. In our first video, we took a look at types of media and how they've developed and what media is. Today, we're going to look about a little bit about how media is organized and what it is they do. Now, we have to look at one issue here, which is that media is privately controlled, and this is a business just like anything else. The goals of business is to create profit. And so, you know, what's happened over time is that you really have a small number of TV stations that are publicly owned, or they're sort of owned by government agencies or semi-government agencies that are out there. Okay. But the media is independent in deciding what and how they report everything. Their biggest consideration has to be advertising revenue, because that's what they're selling and that's how they're making money. So it tends to influence what happens because the media is going to focus on things that they think will gain advertisers and get it through this. Now, what one of the problems is that you have these chains of media. And here, you know, it says massive media conglomerates account for over 4/5 or 80% of the nation's daily newspaper circulation, which means that you have these big corporations who run newspapers in multiple cities that have sort of similar content, similar views, and similar everything. The concern here, of course, is that if you consolidate too much, then are we losing a little bit of freedom of information, or are we losing quality information? I guess is a better question that goes along with that. Broadcast media is being consolidated as well as we go through. Now, how's the news reported? Well, news goes on all the time, and finding it is obviously an issue. And so what news organizations tend to do is they tend to have these things called beats, okay? There are places where major news typically comes from. The White House is a great example of this. And so news organizations will have White House correspondents whose job is to be at the White House all the time and report on kind of what's coming out of that. Congress would be another place where you would where you would assign someone to a beat. Sometimes the news gets their information through what are called trial balloons. Now, this one shows up on the AP exam quite often. So let me explain to you what this is. Sometimes an administration or someone in the government will have an idea that they don't really know how it's going to play out with the people. And so they'll intentionally leak something. In other words, they'll kind of get the word out there intentionally without coming out and saying, here's, you know, the White House statement on this, but they'll leak it. And by leaking it, then you see how people react, how the newspapers react, how the people in general react, and then you know, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. And then you have to understand that there's sort of a relationship between the reporters and their sources, okay? Reporters need access to sources in order to have stories, and newspapers and media outlets need stories in order to survive. The sources need the media in order to get their message out. You know, the office of the president needs to have media. So it ends up in this symbiotic relationship where they both need each other, and so they might not be as critical as one another as, you know, they otherwise might be. The other thing that we've noticed is that over time, news has become less, you know, complex. Superficial is really kind of what we get today. There's little tiny pieces about different stories, and the sound bite is like a clip of maybe you know, someone delivering a speech, Barack Obama or whatever. And notice over here, starting back in 1968, I mean, the average sound bite, the presidential candidate in this case, speaking without interruptions, was 43.1 seconds, which is quite a long time actually. And by 2004, we're down to 7.8 seconds for an average thing. We're taking little tiny clips of what people say and showing them sometimes out of context, okay? There's also less time being used to cover political candidates than there used to be. So people have less information about what these candidates are doing. So then there's the question of bias. Like, is the news biased in one way or the other? A lot of people believe that yes, there is news bias, and you can make a good case depending on the media outlet that it is biased. You know, conservative newspapers, conservative television stations, certainly conservative radio personalities. The same things on the liberal side. They're out there, but on the other side, reporters are taught to be non-biased in their reporting, and it's not really what the ideology is, generally speaking, other than the fact that yes, news is biased according to what's going to draw the largest audience, and negative reporting, showing up bad things, always kind of is important. It's also important what stories they choose to cover and what stories are not covered. That's also a type of bias. All right. In our next session, we're going to get into how this might affect public opinion. But for now, my name is Paul Sargent, and this is AP Government. Thanks for watching. And I'm going to try and stop the video correctly this time. Let's see if it works.